Out there in the business world, a lot of times it's dependent upon the industry, but for a nutshell, everybody has to be careful out there these days. They want to be able to limit their exposure to the bad guys, if you know what I mean. Sometimes, unfortunately, the bad guys could actually be working within the company, so it's always a good idea to keep an eye on things, people within the company and people outside of the company as well. And for the most part, it's not the type of thing you want to try to do yourself, but there are people out there who are in business to help you. That's where we are today here on All In with Bryan Weatherford. We're going to be talking backgrounds and investigations in a little bit more. As a matter of fact, the name of the company is Santoni Backgrounds and Investigations, and our guest, Tim Santoni, here on the show today. Tim, how are you, sir? Good to see you.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. I was intrigued the minute I started reading the notes. Licensed private investigator is one of those professions that we all think is really cool. I'm guessing maybe there's a tainted view of it just we watch TV, and you're probably not quite as cool as that, but you're certainly essential out there. And I'm just curious, before you got into this, little Tim back in the day, have you always been interested in this line of work?
Actually, it's a family business and I was exposed to it at a very early age. And, it wasn't something that I, had an interest in initially, but when I got involved and got to see kind of behind the scenes of what it's all about, the types of things that we get to see and experience, the types of clients we get to work with, that was more of the exciting part. And then learning all the skills and kind of things that need to be in line, that was quite a process, but that was enjoyable as well.
We talked to more than a few people, Tim, who same situation, different professions, but grew up in a family business and never really thought that they would want to do that. But somehow, I guess maybe it's ingrained from childhood or whatever that we're all products of our environment. If that was your environment, eventually you came back to it. So it's kind of neat to hear the way that you got back into this. One of the things, looking at the notes, that you've always been into is helping people with their risk mitigation. Big term there. Can you break it down for us a little bit? What does that mean exactly, mitigating risk?
Yeah, risk mitigation is kind of a blanketing term. Some people think insurance or they think different things, but really what I'm passionate about is helping clients, employers and businesses, nonprofits mitigate risk in their business. And that starts with the hiring process, kind of a pre-employment background check, and also containing risks. We live in a very litigious world. And the evidence and information that a lot of people need to fight and win cases, whether that's in pre-litigation, litigation, or just any kind of administrative courts, is super important. And really gaining that leverage and that upper hand to win, when in fact there are nefarious folks out there that may be manipulating the system. Obviously, when there's fraud or aspects of fraud that impact that. So just getting to the truth, getting to the bottom of things so that people can make strategic business decisions, and hopefully can move on from awful situations that they can and do arise just in the course of doing business.
Well, it's certainly easier if you're able to help people to avoid a situation than it is to get them out of that situation once they get there. So I absolutely understand that aspect of what it is you're doing. Like so many professions out there, Tim, there's always different trends. There's new things going on. Is it the same with the private investigation world? Are there different trends out there that maybe weren't here a year ago?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely trends that impact the industry, and in terms of the COVID pandemic has impacted a lot of different workers' comp and claims related things in the private investigation industry, just because there's less need for it. But the trends are really just towards just massive amounts of data being available for procurement online that are available to the general public. So there's just a trend towards desktop research requiring just much more review and verification of data that's available publicly, which is a challenge. And I think that we also, you kind of referenced it, the CSI, the television effect, the idea that people, whether that's employers or businesses or lawyers or consumers, have this belief that because they see it on TV, that an investigator, an investigation firm like ours can uncover it. And so that's not always the case.
Well, and also to just expand on that a little bit, a lot of times people see things on TV, and as you just mentioned, there's all sorts of information that any of us can get on the internet these days. So we're thinking, we don't need Tim, I can do this myself. But like you already said, you have to be able to dig through it. A lot of fake news out there, if you will, like there is in so many other circumstances. So is that what you're talking about? People think they can do this, but the information they're finding, if it's not correct, it's no good. Fair enough?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, the information's out there. Also, it's not verified. So there's a lot of free data sources. And also the difference with working in a private investigator is that licensed firm that can provide third-party evidence if you're investigating your own case, you can't testify or be deposed as a witness or an expert or someone who's an expert researcher because there's a conflict there. So for informational purposes, it's great. From an evidentiary perspective and a legal perspective, it doesn't work.
Talk to me on the employee screening side of things. I mean, it's similar yet a little bit different from the PI work you do, but for the most part, what are employers these days looking for when it comes to hiring someone as far as the background checks? How far back do they want to go, and what type of information are they looking for?
Yeah, great question. So, employment background screening, there's tons of compliance. So some people want to look back as far and as deep and as wide as possible, but there are some constraints when it comes to state and federal regulations. But at the core of it, most employers are looking at criminal records as a baseline. And they may look at other things like verification of employment and education. The real trend is towards looking at other things like social media. Just with regard, hate speech, intolerance, violence, things, especially with people working remote, you may not see them or interview them. So what they say and do online could impact their ability to, they could pose a risk to their clients, the customers, and to anyone they're in contact with. So that's kind of a trend, and really a bigger trend is using all this information to make an informed decision and to protect the brand, the reputation, right? What people say online can be used against companies, and they need to be aware of that. In a proactive manner.
I'm glad you just mentioned something that I wanted to touch on, the fact that there are an inordinate amount of people working from home these days, certainly more so than ever in our history for obvious reasons. But as we continue to go on and more people will be working from home, do you see that impacting your business even more so? Just stretching a little bit on what you said. Nowadays, a company's going to hire someone and they may not see them because they're not working in the ivory tower, if you will. They're actually at home. Does that bring up a whole new set of things we need to be looking for before we bring a new person on board?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a trend that's been in place before, and it's even more present now. So I think that there's a couple things. One is that if they're working from home, they're not interacting with other employees, partners, vendors, customers. So there's less of a risk factor. So that could decrease the need for potentially the scope of a background check. On the investigation side, I think that aspect of working from home opens up things a lot to people moonlighting on the side, starting up side businesses. And I think it creates the time element and the flexibility for them to maybe, for those less loyal employees, to be doing other activities that may detract from or even, jeopardize the business or potentially, cause business to disappear if people are taking business. So in that regard, it's a little bit different, but those are a couple of things that come to mind.
Jumping back to the PI side of things, Tim, do you work, I'm guessing you work with a bunch of attorneys. A lot of firms don't have a full-time person, but do you come in on a case-by-case, as-needed basis as a PI, up to and including your role as a expert witness when needed? Talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, so majority of our clients are law firms or attorneys, and the people within those, usually their client is an insurance company, a brand owner, or some sort of a business. But the need for, evidence in these cases that are in the cases that are in litigation is usually where it's at. We also do work directly with brand owners in matters involving counterfeiting and trademark infringement and things like that. There's a lot of competitive intelligence and mystery shopping for products and services. But yeah, the law firms is kind of the makes up 80+% of our investigative clients.
So as far as an expert witness, if there's a case that goes to trial, is there an expert witness on each side? And if so, how does that work? Well, you have an expert here and an expert here.
Yeah, so expert witnesses are something that, it's a loosely used term, but usually be coming in to just validate the evidence. And there could be an expert witness who's validating evidence from one side or the other. There could be expert witnesses on both sides. I think we think of movies and people that are, hey, here's my, my doctor versus your doctor. Usually the expert witness work that I would do would be coming advising attorneys in the process of litigation on how to evaluate and determine if evidence was obtained in a lawful and admissible way, and potentially other requests for information and evidence that may be out there that they're not aware of, and then kind of following up on that. So just kind of helping them work through that process, kind of as an outside consultant who has experience in these types of litigation cases.
Makes total sense. You're exactly right. They may come up with a case that they don't see that often. You've seen it several times, therefore, expert witness. Hey, Tim, out of time today. Just a fascinating career for you, and it's really interesting hearing the backstory of how it began as a family business, even before you knew it was going to be your business as well. Thanks for sharing your story with us. I appreciate it. Take care.